Hey guys, so today's video is going to be a book video, a big fat book video. We got some TBRs, we got some DNFs, and we got a couple of reviews. And if you're not a book person and you have no idea what I'm talking about and you're used to my normal content, a TBR means to be read, a DNF means did not finished, and I'm sure you can gather what a book review is. A lot of mini reviews, a lot of thoughts on books. I'm in a really good season with reading, and what usually happens is I will go through seasons because once I read enough bad books in a row, I'm just like, I'm out. I don't care. I don't want to read for a while. I'm not ready to get hurt anymore. But I've been kind of on an uptick with reading lately, and some of the books I've read recently have been so good, and I wanted to share them with you. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, thumbs up the video if you enjoy it, and check the down bar for links on my social media platforms. Come hang out on Patreon for bonus content and the book club. Speaking of the book club, we didn't do it in May, but we're going to pick it back up in June. And if any of these books seem like something you would like to read in the book club, please let me know because I have no idea what I want to do for the book club. So anyway, let's get started. The first DNF I have is probably going to surprise a lot of people, but this is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And I wanted to read this book from the second I heard about it coming out, which I think the first time I heard about it was very early in 2020. It was like on a bunch of people's lists for highly anticipated releases. And you guys may not know this about me, but my grandmother was Mexican, so my dad's side of the family is Mexican. And I was I was fortunate enough when I was a lot younger to kind of be immersed in that culture a little bit, but it tapered off the older I got, and I'm very far removed from it. I know the smallest amount of Spanish a person can possibly know. But that's part of why I wanted to read it. Plus, like, the idea of a Mexican Gothic story, just so interesting. And I thought it was going to be amazing. And it was for a little while. But I don't know, you guys. I think this could be a really good example of a book that would probably have been good if I hadn't anticipated it so much, because I picked this up I think around February, so it was well after I had originally intended to read it, and the hype around it had kind of reached a boiling point for me, and I was very disappointed. In the beginning, I thought this was going to be something that I would love and really fawn over and have a lot of nostalgia for. You know, sometimes you read a book and you can't stop thinking about it and like you miss the characters and stuff. That did not happen. In fact, about halfway in, I was kind of like, okay, what is going on here? So without any spoilers, basically this tells the story of Noemi, who goes to visit a cousin of hers. Her cousin writes her a letter and says that she is sick and she thinks her family is poisoning her family being her in-laws and her new husband. Noemi goes to check it out. It's a haunted house. It's a Gothic tale. Like, you know the story. And I just thought this was ridiculous. Like, by the time you find out kind of what's going on, I just thought it was so ridiculous. I didn't finish it. Like, I think I might have something like 20 pages. You know it's bad if I won't even finish the last 20 pages. Now, the writing style itself for this author, I really enjoyed. It was very beautiful. Like, I could see everything she described so perfectly and vividly. But the story itself, you also have to understand, like, I don't like a whole lot of fantastical things. Like, you got to base this in realism. And even if it is a haunted house story, like, this was just too far for me. And if you guys finish this and I'm really screwing up by not finishing the last 20 pages and it's going to wrap up in some way that's going to make it all make sense and bring it home, let me know. But I did not finish this. Next DNF. This is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This was a quick DNF. I quit reading this one at page 39. I didn't get any further than this. But I don't think it's because the book itself is bad. In fact, I have very high hopes for this book. But this book is about a pandemic, and it was actually written, I think, in 2014, so well before our situation came to pass. And even though the plague or the virus, whatever you want to call it, that happens in this book is far more severe than what we dealt with, it still stressed me out. Like, I just was like I literally was having such a visceral reaction to it that I just couldn't finish it because it was giving me anxiety. But I will tell you one thing. Reading this book, the little bit of it that I did read, made me feel really grateful that as bad as things were in 2020 and the fact, we're still not out of the woods yet completely regardless, it made me really grateful that it was only what it was. And if you yourself have found yourself in a position where like you're having a hard time having perspective here, and I'm not trying to minimize anybody's suffering. I know this situation has been absolutely devastating for so many people. Maybe pick this up. I'm talking about the people who are like, my rights about masks and stuff. Like, get some perspective. We're very lucky that things only went where they went. Have some respect for biology and viruses and the huge threat they will always have on humanity as a whole. And if you need help getting there, read this book, because I'm telling you, to say I was stressed out, understatement. The first is My Sister the Serial Killer by Uyinkan Braithwaite. I hope I said that correctly. I put this on the grid. I talked about it in stories. I talked about this a lot after I read it. It's quick. It's only, 200 and something pages. I read this in a couple of hours one day. From the second I picked it up until the second I put it down, like, I'd be surprised if I blinked. It was so good. Everything about it was so good. I will read anything this author writes moving forward. Astronaut. Like, first of all, a lot of it is like poetry. There are some of the chapters that are literally only a couple of sentences long or maybe a couple of paragraphs long that read like poetry to me. I just was in love with the writing style. You have a relationship between two sisters and best friends. I love reading about that so much for some reason. So this is two sisters, and one of them is a serial killer, and the other one is kind of bearing witness to the train wreck that is this sister and the relationship between them and their mother, and this conversation around beauty and family relationships. And there's times where it's hilarious. Like, I laughed. I don't know about you guys. You know how they say that there's people out there that cannot see, they don't see things in their head, like mind movies or whatever. They don't visualize anything. I think I have the exact opposite of that. Like, I see things so clearly in my head to the point where when I read a book, I take famous people and like movie stars, and it could be any movie star from any year at any age, and I put them in the book. It's so weird. But this was one of those books that I could see it so I was there. Like, it's quick, it's funny, it's dark, it's amazing. It ended perfectly. I loved it. Next is like this is not hot off the presses. Everybody been loving this book. And in fact, way back in September of last year, I put this on the grid and said I was about to read it. And I'll never do that again because I did not finish it. I started it, but I was going through some stressful stuff around that time. And again, I kind of go through seasons with reading. I'm going to try to quit doing that. But I think I was coming out of a season. I don't know why I didn't finish this. I couldn't tell you. No good reason. But I picked it back up a couple of weeks ago, plowed through it, could not read it fast enough. This book deserves all the hype that it gets. I have never read a book that made me want to give up all my worldly possessions and go live in a marsh. But this did that. Like, the story follows a young girl named Kaya. Well, she's not a young girl the whole time, but it follows the story of Kaya, who, through a string of terrible misfortunes in her life, basically gets abandoned at a very young age and has to kind of grow up in a swamp. She doesn't go to school. She has to figure out how to make money and survive out there on her own. And there's a murder mystery in here too, and there's a bit of a love story in here. But I think one of the things I loved about it the most was it talks about nature so much. And if you guys don't know, I'm kind of a tree hugger. Like, I love plants. I love going on hikes. I love fresh air. Like, I love nature. I love animals. So the fact that this book talked about, and some people I read like through reviews and things like that said they did not like that about this book. I don't know. I loved it because, first of all, this book was written by a zoologist. So it talks a lot about, the behaviors of animals and the way they interact with their ecosystem. And it actually there's a reason that they do this. Like, it all points to actually what's happening in the story, big picture wise, as far as the themes are concerned. But I loved that. It was just so beautiful. I will never forget Kaya for the rest of my life. It was just such a good book. Next is The Push by Ashley Audrain. This is a book I finished most recently, and I read this in one day, which it's not exactly the shortest book in the world. It's 300 pages, so I guess it's not that long, but I finished this in one day. I loved it. I stayed up all night reading, which I've only done that with one other book in my whole life. Like, I was sucked into this book from the very first page until the last one. Essentially what we're dealing with here is the story of a mother. And the fact that once she becomes a mother, it doesn't look the way everyone tells you it's going to look or it's supposed to look. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And she's pretty sure her child is a demon or something to that effect. And it's not the first book I've read like this. I actually read a book called Baby Teeth that it kind of reminded me of. But I like this one way more than Baby Teeth. I felt like Baby Teeth really did not go into get into the meat and potatoes of what I was hoping for. I didn't like the way that it ended. This one, oh man, it talks about cycles of abuse. It talks about grief. Like, it was so moving, so dark sometimes. There was a couple of times when I was reading it where I was like, whoa. Like, there's one scene at the very close to the end of the book where she's doing something with, I don't want to give anything away. She does something at the end of the book that was so heart-wrenching, and just, even though to read it, you're kind of like, wow, she's completely gone nutter butters. You still empathize so much with her because you feel this pain. I don't know how to explain it. It's really, really good. So if you are interested in reading something that might bum you out, stress you out, and make you feel so many things, this is what you want to read. So the next one that I finished is Dare Me by Megan Abbott. This is a 4-star, definitely not a 5-star, but I wanted to share it with you guys because I do not read YA. I think most booktubers, like big YouTubers, are YA people, and I am not. I didn't even know this was YA when I picked it up, but this is good. This was really, really well written. I heard about this one from Chapter Stacks. I think she's my favorite booktuber because almost everything she likes, with little to no exception, I end up liking. And she talked about this. It didn't end the way I wanted it to end. And some of it was lacking in terms of like the payoffs, if you will. But the lead up to it, the experience of it was it had a lot of teeth. That's the way I'll put it. Like, the way that it's about two best friends, the way that they describe their friendship, and the one character, Beth, like, I don't know, all sharp edges and venom. Like, that's the only way I could think to describe her. And the way she was written, she's another character that will always stay with me. And I can't believe this is YA, quite frankly. It was dark, and some of the stuff in it, like, do teenagers really talk like this? Because we did not talk like this. We were not this witty or this vulgar. It's really good. I'm going to highly recommend. Every time I try to set out and do a TBR, I fall off. Anytime I set an intention to read a certain book, I will fall off, and I will DNF. So if I start some of these books and I find out that I don't really like them, then I'm just not going to finish them. I will update you later on how this all plays out. But the first one is Queenie by Candace Corty Williams. This has been on my TBR since last year when I bought it, and I'm trying to make a conscious effort to read more Black authors, and this is something that I feel like will be a nice palate cleanser, because I think what I do is I read too many thrillers or too many psychological thrillers or horrors, and then they all start to be the same, and then I'll be like, all these books suck and I get sick of them. So what I'm trying to do is read, like, alternate. If I read a thriller, the next book has to be something a little bit more contemporary or literary fiction or whatever. And this one I think is going to be really good. This is basically about a woman who is in the middle of a spiral, and I have been there. I know what it's like when it feels like all the doors are shutting in your face and you just don't know where to go or who you are or how you're going to get through it. And I don't know. I think I'm going to like it. I have really high hopes for this one. Next is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I don't know why I picked this one up. I think I bought a book online and it was like in the, readers also purchased section. So I picked it up. And I'm excited to read it. It Seems like it's got something to do with the afterlife, and it's kind of more ethereal and a little bit more high concept, but it has amazing reviews. Some people say it's one of those life-changing books. So it's like the Midnight Library is almost kind of like all the different lives, like the books in the Midnight Library are all the different lives you could have led. So I guess like somewhere between here in the afterlife or in the afterlife, you get to go to the Midnight Library and see how all your choices would have played out if you made them differently. Sounds good? Interested? Next is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I already started this one. I'm right about here. And so far I like it. It's too early to tell, but it seems like it's the story of, so far it's 2 women and an apothecary and poison and murdering the low down dirty men in their life, and I'm sure hilarity will ensue. Not gonna lie, the cover and the idea of like an apothecary and all that stuff is kind of what drew me to it, but you know, no shame in my game. Next is Girl A by Abigail Dean. This is supposed to be a story about abuse. Like, I sure know how to pick a fun beach read, do I not? This one's supposed to be pretty heavy, but I am endlessly fascinated by the psychology and the effects of abuse. I think it's a morbid fascination for me. I don't typically get triggered by this kind of stuff. If you are triggered by this kind of stuff, this doesn't seem like the book you want to get into. But apparently it's going to be a propulsive tale of escape and survival, a psychological family story about the shifting alliances and betrayals of sibling relationships, the secrets our siblings keep from themselves and from each other. Like, I think I'm going to like this book. At the very least, I'm going to appreciate the story it is telling. Stay tuned, I'll tell you what I think. Next is Good Company by Cynthia D'Apri Sweeney. I don't know why I picked this one up. I saw this at the bookstore. I read through the jacket and a couple of pages like I always do before I bring a book home. And quite frankly, it kind of reminded me of a Leanne Moriarty book. She wrote Big Little Lies, The Husband's Secret, What Alice Forgot. I've read almost all of her books and I love them. They have this kind of like drama, sort of Desperate Housewives kind of vibe to them. Something just light, something kind of frothy. And that's going to be, again, kind of a palate cleanser between some of these darker books. So I have only read a few pages of this. Like I said, I read the first few pages of every book before I bring it home. And I am interested. It apparently has something to do with marriage, motherhood, and friendship. These are topics that I'm endlessly interested in, particularly motherhood and friendship. And yeah, I have high hopes and I'll let you know what I think. Also, it says read with Jenna. Who's Jenna? All right, guys, that is the end of this video. If you have read any of these, have thoughts on these, please leave them down below. I love to talk about books. In fact, every time I read a really good book, immediately I text my best friend and I'm like, you have to read this and you have to read it like soon because I need to talk about it. Love to talk about it. As always, thank you to the patrons. If any of my patrons are here, as always, and like I said at the top of the video, please let me know if any of these are calling out to you for book club picks, even if it's ones I've already read. I'll read them again. We can do this together. Once more, I love talking about books. I'm more than happy to do it. Hope you guys are enjoying some of the different types of content I'm creating. I have some really cool ideas for some stuff I would like to do in the future. I'm feeling pretty good. Hope you guys are feeling good as well. And I will see you guys after my vaccination-cation. Have a really good day. Bye.